Assalamu alaikum and Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, this is now part B of week 9 of this semester. So, this lecture basically covers the second half of week 9. And today's lecture covers class C and class D amplifiers. Before we proceed to discuss class C and class D amplifiers, let's have a brief review of the previous lecture. So previously we discussed harmonic distortion and we concluded the following. Non-linearity of amplifier results in distortion, and the distortion can be quantified by obtaining the Fourier series representation of the output. So the coefficients of the higher harmonic components give us the quantitative picture of the level of distortion in the output signal. The second module that we discussed was the heat dissipation in power transistors and the issue of heat sinks. So we concluded that heat dissipation and junction temperature inside the transistor are related by the Newton's law of cooling, which meant that we need to have minimal thermal resistance between the junction and the ambient environment in order to minimize the junction temperature, and heat sinks are used for this purpose. So now we start with class C amplifiers. So here are some basics of these amplifiers. The duty cycle is less than 50%. How this is achieved, we will see in the next slide. The efficiency is higher than either class A or class B amplifiers, including the transformer coupled class A amplifier. And this is the consequence of having duty cycle less than 50%. Which means that the amplifier operates only when the input signal is close to its peak value, thus minimizing the DC component of the voltage and current at the output. Now these amplifiers are slightly different from class A or class B amplifier, and the difference is that their use is limited to narrow band and low power application. Class C amplifiers operate only at frequencies which are close to their resonant frequency. So now let's have a look at the circuit. You can see that between the collector and the voltage supply, an LC shunt resonance circuit is inserted, and the load then may be connected in parallel to the LC circuit. On the input side, you can see that we have negative biasing for the base, and this is what results in a duty cycle of less than 50%. Now applying the superposition principle, the voltage at the base would be sum of this biasing voltage, which is minus VBB, and the input signal Vi. There is an element RFC which is an inductor, and that is connected between this minus VBB and the base terminal. The function of this element is to act as open circuit for the incoming input signal Vi, whereas as short circuit for the biasing voltage minus VBB. So the total voltage on the base would be sum of these two voltages, Vi minus VBB. So the total voltage would be equal to Vi minus VBB. So in class C amplifier circuit, the resonant frequency of the LC tuning circuit must be equal to the frequency of the input signal Vi. So therefore the equation for LC will be given as shown on this slide. So let's analyze the circuit in a bit more detail. So what we can do, we can split the VB into its AC and DC components and then separately obtain the expressions for VB and VB and then VB will be sum of VB and VB DC. So let's first calculate the VBDC. So here you can see the DC equivalent circuit of the class C amplifier. On the input side, the coupling capacitor is open circuit, whereas the RFC is short circuit. So what is RFC? RFC is the radio frequency choke, as we discussed earlier. It is basically a high value inductor which will be short circuit for DC. So we have a short circuit from minus VBB to VB and an open circuit between Vi and VB. So VBDC will be simply equal to minus VBB. The next step is to find the VBAC. So now for AC, the RFC choke is an open circuit because the inductance of RFC is very high, whereas the coupling capacitor will be short circuit, as the coupling capacitor is supposed to be short circuit in the operating frequency range. So then VB will simply be equal to Vi. And as you can see in the figure, another important point, that VCC is now replaced by ground because the DC voltage VCC has AC component of 0. So the AC component of VCC is 0. So hence the VCC has been replaced by ground. So now VB is sum of VBDC and VBAC, and this gives us VB equal to Vi minus VBB, which is what we claimed earlier about VB. So now let's have a look at the waveforms of VB and Vi. As you can observe from the plot, VB is simply Vi shifted along negative Z axis by VBB. So now how will this transistor operate? We know that the transistor will be on only when VB is greater than 0.7 volts. Now looking at the graph, for VB, we can observe that this will occur only for a small portion of the cycle. The portion of the cycle where VB is greater than 0.7 volt is marked by shaded region, which is in green color. So only in this green color region you will have non-zero IB, and elsewhere IB will be 0. So now your duty cycle is considerably less than 50%. From this information we can obtain a rough graph for the IB and IC. So let's proceed and have a look at how IB and IC will look. So now looking at the graph of IB, we can see that the IB has a very small duty cycle. As a consequence of the small duty cycle, that is less than 50% duty cycle for the transistor, due to the reason that we just discussed. An additional property that you can notice from this plot is that the time period of the IB is same as the time period of the VI. Or we can say that the frequency of IB is same as the frequency of VI. So what is the reason for this? We return back to the discussion on harmonic distortion in power amplifiers, and there we stated that if the input to a time invariant system is periodic, the output will also be periodic regardless of the type of the system. And as we discussed over there, as far as the time period of the input signal is concerned, the transistor can be considered as a time invariant system, as the characteristic of a transistor will change only over a period of months or years. So if we can approximate our circuit as a time invariant system, then for any periodic input we will have a periodic output with the same frequency as that of the input signal. And the consequence of this is that the IB will have the same frequency as VI. Now an additional point, the input to the transistor is VB, not VI. So how we can claim that the frequency will be equal to that of VI? The reason is that VB is sum of VI and minus VBB. Now minus VBB is a DC voltage, so it simply results in an offset. That is, VB is simply VI shifted by minus VBB, so both will have the same frequency. Now we can plot IC. So IC will be simply beta times IB, as long as the transistor is not in the saturation mode. And even when the transistor is in saturation mode, it's still a time invariant system, so even in that case IC will have the same frequency as IB, because IC is controlled by IB, so which is in turn controlled by VI. So we can say that IC is a function of VI. So if we have a time invariant system, which is the case for our amplifier, then IC and VI will have the same frequency and the same time period. So what do we mean by saying that IC is controlled by IB? By this we mean that the transistor goes into saturation mode only when IB is above certain critical value, which normally will be given by VCC divided by beta times RC. So IC will have the saturation value only when IB is above certain critical value, and when IB is below that critical value, the transistor is in active mode and IC is again simply beta times IB. So hence it is IB that is controlling IC, and both will have the same time period. So now as IC is periodic, we can decompose it into a Fourier series, or we can represent IC by a Fourier series. So for any periodic current, I will be equal to I naught, which is the DC component and which correspond to the term A naught in your standard Fourier series, then plus sum of IAN into cos 2 pi n f naught t, which are the AN of your standard Fourier series representation, and then the IBN correspond to BN of your standard Fourier series representation. So in this way we can decompose the IC into a DC component and then AC components, and within the AC components you have the fundamental harmonic, which correspond to A1 cos 2 pi n f naught t and plus B1 sin 2 pi f naught t. So when you have n is equal to 1, you have the fundamental component, and for n greater than 1 you have the higher harmonics. This is the same as the case for the output voltage of power amplifiers that we discussed in the previous lecture when we were discussing the harmonic distortion in power amplifiers. So let's first consider the DC component of IC. So here you can see the DC equivalent circuit of the class C amplifier. So the capacitor in the LC circuit will be open circuit, whereas the inductor will be short circuit, and as the inductor is short circuit, you have zero voltage across the resistance. So this is how the DC component of the IC is removed. The DC component of IC passes entirely through the inductor, which acts as short circuit for it. And one more point, on an earlier slide we mentioned that the R basically models the resistive component of a real LC circuit, as both real inductor and real capacitor will have non-zero resistance. So when you have a real LC circuit, it will be modeled by an RLC circuit. In addition to that, when a load is attached between VCC and V0, so this resistance can also be incorporated into R. So now we come to the AC equivalent circuit for F is equal to F0. So as you know, a shunt LC circuit is equivalent to an open circuit at frequency equal to its resonant frequency. So at F is equal to F0, LC will be an open circuit. So now the fundamental component of IC will pass only through the resistors. This will result in a sinusoidal voltage across RL. So now we come to the higher frequency components of IC, that is when F is much greater than F0. So in this case, the inductor is acting like an open circuit and capacitor is acting like a short circuit. So the capacitor will provide short circuit path to IC, and V0 will therefore be 0 due to the short circuit path provided by the capacitor. So the high frequency components of V0 become 0. When a current which is periodic with the fundamental frequency equal to the resonant frequency of the RLC circuit, and here we are talking about shunt RLC circuit, passes through that shunt RLC circuit, a sinusoidal voltage develops across the RLC circuit, which has the frequency equal to the resonant frequency of the LC resonant circuit. Now this phenomena is not limited just to electrical circuits. It is a general characteristic of resonant systems. Whenever you apply a periodic input to a resonant system with the fundamental frequency of the input being equal to the resonant frequency of that system, the resonant system will oscillate at its resonant frequency. And in this case, the input does not need to be of pure single frequency. The input can and will generally contain higher frequency harmonics. The only condition is that the fundamental frequency of the input should be equal to the fundamental frequency of the or the resonant frequency of the system. And when this condition is satisfied, the system will oscillate at its resonant frequency. So now we start with the next module of this lecture, which is class D amplifiers. So class D amplifiers are different from class A, class B and class C amplifier in a fundamental way. That is, they operate only in cutoff and saturation modes. They do not operate in active mode. So when a transistor operates only in cutoff and saturation mode, we can say that the transistor is functioning as a switch, because in saturation mode the voltage across the transistor is very small, so it can be approximated as a short circuit, whereas in cutoff mode the transistor is acting like an open circuit. So the behavior is thus similar to that of a switch. Now when the transistor acts like a switch, the power dissipation is minimal, so the efficiency is higher than 90%, which is higher than either class A, B or C amplifiers. So now some basic theory of the class D amplifiers. We know that power dissipation is equal to the product of VCE and the collector current IC. So in active mode we have a high power dissipation due to significantly high VCE. In cutoff mode the current is 0, so there is no power dissipation, and in saturation mode VCE is approximately equal to 0. It's not exactly 0, but it's very small. Its value will be around 0.5 to 0.7 volts. So power dissipation can be approximated as 0. So here you can see the basic layout of a class D amplifier circuit. So the input signal is applied at the input of the controller, which is basically a PWM generator. We will discuss more about PWM, which stands for pulse width modulation. So we will explain what does pulse width modulation waveform looks like. So the controller generates a PWM waveform, which then controls the transistors T1 and T2 through an interfacing circuitry. The interfacing circuitry is required because generally the PWM generator or the controller will not be able to provide the required current and voltage levels for the transistor T1 and T2, which are power transistors. They either may be power MOSFETs or power BJTs. So now the transistor T1 and T2 are switched on or off depending on the state of the PWM waveform. Then the load is connected through a band pass filter to the output of this power transistor circuit, as you can see in the diagram which is given on this slide. So when T1 is on and T2 is off, V0 is equal to VDC, and when T1 is off and T2 is on, V0 is equal to 0. We will have more detailed discussion on this point shortly. So now a few words about the controller or the PWM generator. The controller can either be a digital circuit like a microcontroller or a DSP chip. or it can be an analog circuit, usually an op-amp based circuit. Uh, Currently, the microcontroller is the most appropriate choice for PWM generation due to the advancement in digital circuit technology. An additional advantage of using a microcontroller for PWM generation is that you can also carry out this digital signal processing of your choice on the input signal before you use it to generate a PWM, and the same holds true for a DSP chip. So the pulse width modulation, what does it uh, stands for? What does it mean? So before we can discuss the pulse width modulation, we should remind ourselves the commonly known types of modulation that you have already encountered. That is the amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, and phase shift keying. So what is common between these modulation schemes? That there is a certain parameter of the modulated signal which we can represent by a variable f, and this parameter is a function of the input or message signal, and in equation form we can write f function of t is equal to g function of m, which is function of t. So the essence of modulation is that a certain parameter of the output waveform is dependent upon the input signal. This is the core of all the modulation schemes, and the same holds true for pulse width modulation as well. So what kind of modulation we have in PWM? In PWM, the amplitude and frequency is kept constant, whereas it is the duty cycle which is function of the input signal. So mathematically we can write it in this form, that the duty cycle d will be equal to k times the input signal plus some constant d naught. So let's uh, discuss this point further. So here you can see a PWM waveform. You can see that the amplitude of the waveform is constant at certain Vm, and so is the frequency and time period. But as the duty cycle is changing, the definition of time period and frequency becomes slightly tricky. So here we define the time period as time interval between successive rising edges of the waveform, as you can see in this figure, and then the frequency is defined as the inverse of this time period. If we take any other 2 points, then the frequency that we measure will change with duty cycle, so that will not be a valid measure of the time period. So the time period has to be measured from rising edge to rising edge of the PWM waveform. So here is the class D amplifier circuit that we discussed earlier. So the PWM signal controls the transistors T1 and T2 through an interfacing circuitry, and then the V naught, which is the output of this transistor circuit, is connected to load through a band pass filter. So now we analyze the circuit for two states. First, in which PWM is high, T1 is on and T2 is off. And the second one, when PWM is low, T1 is off and T2 is on. So now consider the state in which the PWM is high, and this corresponds to T between 0 and T on. So now, as PWM is high, T1 is on and T2 is off. So V naught will be equal to VDC. As T2 is open circuit, so V naught is isolated from ground, whereas T1 provides short circuit path from VDC to the node V naught. When T becomes larger than T on, the PWM becomes low. So now the situation is as what you can see in this figure. T is now between T on and capital T, which is the time period of the PWM. So now T1 is off and T2 is on. So V naught is short circuited through T2, whereas it is isolated from VDC by T1, which is an open circuit. Now we can summarize the two states in this table. So the leftmost column is T, then we have the column VPWM, that is the PWM voltage or level. Then we have the state of transistor T1 and T2, and finally V naught. So you can see when PWM is high, T1 is on, T2 is off, and V naught is equal to VDC. When PWM is low, T1 is off, T2 is on, and V naught is 0. So now this is how the waveform of VDC will look like. And if you can notice, it is simply a scaled version of the PWM waveform, which is controlling the transistor T1 and T2. So V naught will also be basically a PWM voltage, and the time period of V naught will be same as the time period of the initial PWM waveform. And similarly, the duty cycle of V naught will also be equal to the duty cycle of the PWM waveform, which is controlling the transistors T1 and T2. And we repeat this point again, that time period here is measured from rising edge to the next rising edge, and then FPWM is simply the inverse of this time period, whereas duty cycle is T on divided by the total time period. Now the load is connected to V naught through a band pass filter, and the band pass filter can be decomposed into two blocks, a high pass filter and a low pass filter. So first let's have a look at the behavior of low pass filter. Now a low pass filter can be approximated as a moving average filter. because when you take average of a waveform over a certain period, the high frequency components are cancelled out. So the behavior of a moving average filter resembles to that of a low pass filter. They are not exactly the same. The response of a low pass filter is not exactly the same as a moving average filter, but they are approximately they are the same. So now we will have the instantaneous voltage will be equal to the moving average of V naught, and that will be equal to duty cycle times VDC, because V naught is equal to VDC from t is equal to 0 to t is equal to t on, and it's equal to 0 from t on to capital T. So when you take the average of V naught over 1 PWM cycle, the average value will be equal to d time VDC. Here the V refers to V naught. So actually here we are taking the average of V naught. Then we can put the expression for D from the earlier slide, where D is equal to K times Vi plus D naught. And when we solve it, we get two terms. First term K VDC into Vi. So this term is directly proportional to Vi, whereas the second term is a DC term, as it is a constant term. So now when we add a high pass filter to this circuit, so that instead of low pass filter now we have a band pass filter, the DC term will be removed by the high pass filter, and we will be left only with the AC term, which was equal to K times VDC into Vi, or we can write it as AV naught times Vi, where AV naught, which is the gain of this class D amplifier, will be equal to K times VDC. So now we can see that the voltage at the load will be directly proportional to the input voltage Vi, with the gain AV naught equal to K times VDC, where K is the constant which appears in the equation for the duty cycle that we discussed earlier. So now it is acting like an amplifier with gain AV naught, but with the advantage that the transistors are no longer operating in active mode. Thus they have minimal heat dissipation, and consequently the circuit has very high efficiency. However, there are certain conditions that must be fulfilled. So the first condition is that the PWM frequency should be much higher than the highest frequency in the input signal. And similarly, the cutoff frequency of the low pass filter in the band pass filter should be much smaller than F minimum. So only then the approximations that we assume in analyzing the circuit will be true. So now we come to the issue of error control in class D amplifier. The main source of error in class D amplifier will be VDC. As you can remember from our discussion on the output of the class D amplifier, the gain of the class D amplifier is directly proportional to VDC. So any variation in VDC will result in variation in the gain and hence error or distortion in the output. So in order to minimize the error in class D amplifier, a feedback control loop is introduced, which you can see in the given figure. So the gain of the feedback path is beta, whereas the controller that we use can either be PI, PID or some other controller. So using a feedback control loop in the class D amplifier will result in smaller error in the output. So let's summarize our discussion. Our lecture consisted of two modules. So the first one was the class C amplifiers. So class C amplifiers have duty cycle less than 50%, resulting from negative biasing at the base. The reduced duty cycle results in relatively higher ratio of AC voltage and current to the total voltage and current at the output of the amplifier. This results in higher efficiency compared to either class A or class B amplifier. On the output side of class C amplifier, there is an LC resonant circuit. So the class C amplifier is a narrow band circuit operating at frequencies near the resonant frequency of LC circuit. So this amplifier can be used only for input frequencies which are close to the resonant frequency of the LC tuning circuit. So the second portion of our lecture was class D amplifier. So class D amplifiers are characterized by the fact that the transistors in the class D amplifier operate as switches. They do not operate in the active mode, they operate only in cutoff and saturation mode. This results in minimal power dissipation and very high efficiency. The output of the transistor is PWM, that is the pulse width modulation waveform that we discussed earlier. And then this PWM voltage is connected to load through a band pass filter. And the result is that at the load we have the exact replica of the input voltage with a certain gain. So finally we conclude our lecture with an assessment question, and the question is how you can use a class D amplifier as a DC to AC converter. So you can look at the circuit and think over it, and it's a very interesting point. So this ends our lecture. Khudafis and wish you good luck.